One of the most common questions that I get from students who are preparing for FE Electrical and Computer exam, either using my on-demand course or the books, is whether they should take a sequential approach towards preparing for the 17 sections of FE Electrical and Computer exam, or whether they should take a random or non-sequential approach. In this video, we are going to go over advantages and disadvantages for both sequential and non-sequential approach towards preparing for your FE Electrical and Computer exam. And at the end of this video, I will share my personal recommendation as to how you should go about preparing for the FE Electrical and Computer exam. Before we dive into the content, I would really appreciate if you could like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Let us start with the non-sequential approach. Non-sequential approach is generally taken by students who are a recent graduate or they are currently in fourth or final year of their studies. The reason is that these students have a very good idea of what their strengths and weaknesses are. They've taken a bunch of courses, they are in an exam preparation mode, so their strengths and weaknesses are fairly clear to them. But even for these students, as they get started with the FE Electrical and Computer exam preparation, let's say that I'm a student in fourth year and I've always struggled with circuits. So my tendency when I start preparing for the FE Electrical and Computer exam would probably be to, dive into circuits, patch it up, maybe take a look at electronics and power systems, which are sort of related. And then once I've got that fixed, I will go about, looking at the next weakness, the next topic that I'm a little bit scared about. So that's one non-sequential approach that you can take. And I do see a fair number of fourth year, final year students taking this approach. The other approach, a variation of it, is that you might start with your strengths. Okay, if you're very good with math, if you're very good with programming, if you're very good with networks, then you would want to sort of build your confidence and you would take that random approach, one section here, one section here, one section here. Again, the underlying assumption is that you have a very clear understanding of your strengths and weaknesses. And with the second approach, you're sort of building your confidence, slowly diving into it by conquering the smaller portions or the easier portions that you're comfortable with, or you are head-on attacking the more difficult topics because you know that those are your weaknesses, and once you've got that covered, it's going to be smooth sailing from that point onwards. So this is a non-sequential approach, and the assumption is that you know what your strengths and weaknesses are. The disadvantage of this approach is the fact that your progress tracking becomes difficult. You did a section here, a section here, a section here, and now you don't necessarily know that in the grand scheme of things where you stand. You have an idea that, okay, you've patched up all the weaknesses or you have sort of consolidated your strengths, but you don't necessarily know where you're going. The other weakness associated with this is that students start going in circles because they don't necessarily know what is left or how they're going to sort of come up with a plan and effectively utilize their time and the resources that they have or the books or the courses that they're using. They really get a little bit lost unless you are pre-planned with a schedule, unless you clearly know how you're going to go about it. And I've had those students who enroll in my course and they basically say sign up for a monthly subscription, and they only look through some of the sections that they know that they're weak on, and they basically go about the exam preparation with a very selective approach. So it does work for very bold exam takers who have a very clear understanding of what their strengths and weaknesses are, but in my opinion, it is not for everyone. And this approach also has a shortcoming because you might think that you are well aware of your strengths and weaknesses, but once you go through these 17 sections, you might come across some of the other areas which are actually a lot more difficult than you initially anticipated, or they may not be reflective of what you had taken in your undergraduate studies. So all of a sudden, your strength becomes another weakness. And the reverse is true. You might be fearful of, software, you might be fearful of control systems, but when you look at it from the context of FE Electrical and Computer exam, it might actually be one of the easier areas. So again, there's a little bit of speculation, there's a little bit of unknown, there's a little bit of judgment call over here. And that's why this particular approach has its advantages, and a lot of students do utilize that and get done with this exam within a month or so. But generally, these are the final year students or recent graduates. The second approach is the sequential approach, where you start with the very first section for FE Electrical and Computer exam, it's math, and you make your way all the way to the very last section, which is software engineering. So let's talk about some of the advantages of sequential approach. The very first advantage is that it's easy to track your progress because you're going linearly. You will know when you finish math, you will know when you finish probability, you will know when you finish engineering economics, and so on and so forth. So there's no guesswork involved in how far you are in terms of your exam progress. The second advantage, which to me is a big deal, is the fact that once you prepare for this exam in the same order, right, as the questions are going to show up on the exam, because the exam is, as you know, it has a morning portion and an afternoon portion. So the exam would closely follow the specification in the sense that when you go through the NCEES sample exam for FE Electrical, you start with math and then probability and then engineering economics, ethics, properties of electrical material, and so on. And really the computer sections are going to be at the end. So it's not that software will all of a sudden be the very first question on the exam or circuits will be the very last question. So when you prepare for this exam in the same order as the specification is laid out, your job of anticipating the next question on the exam becomes a little bit easier. So there is a little bit of pattern that you can anticipate. It will make you a little bit more comfortable during your preparation and as well as on the day of exam. So what is the downside of sequential approach? The downside of sequential approach is that I find so many students thinking about whether I'm going fast, whether I'm going slow, maybe math is my strength, or maybe math is my weakness. What else is yet to come, right? So you always have that curiosity that, I don't know like how difficult circuits is going to be, how difficult power is going to be, how difficult controls is going to be. So that has students thinking or second guessing themselves so many times during their exam preparation. And my recommendation for that is a 3-round review, which I've discussed in another video. But you basically go through the entire specification in one direction, in one go, okay, without worrying about how much you're able to retain and how much you're able to, understand. Try your level best to engage with the content. Try, if you're using my FE Electrical and Computer Exam Preparation course, it's basically laid out in the same order. So there are quizzes, there are mini exams, there are in-lecture problems, there are theoretical explanations. So when you're going through your FE Electrical and Computer Exam Preparation using a sequential approach, then just take a one-way street. Don't look back. That's your first round of review. Second round of review, things that you found difficult during the first round of review, you basically noted them and you're revisiting them. Give yourself 2 to 3 weeks to do that. And at the end, third round of review, you're basically consolidating all of your knowledge and testing yourself through the practice exams. So this approach works and it makes sure that you're able to increase your retention, you're able to increase your level of understanding. So at this point, you probably obviously know what's my personal preference. My personal preference, whenever I get on a Zoom call with my students who are enrolled in my electrical and computer exam preparation course, or students who are using my books and send me email, ask me questions, I tell them that if you are okay with, a 3-round review type of approach, if you are okay with a little bit of uncertainty as to what else is coming, and if you want to take a methodical approach, my recommendation is to go through the FE Electrical and Computer Exam Preparation in a sequential order, because the benefits, in my opinion, outweigh the disadvantages associated with a sequential approach. And if you're using the course is actually automatically going to track your progress. You complete one lecture, there's a certain percentage that will be assigned to your progression, and you complete the next lecture, the next mini exam, the next quiz, the computer simulated practice exam. All of that is going to be taken care of. If you're using my study guide, so you're going section by section, you're going problem set by problem set in a linear fashion. So there's no guesswork involved in how far you are. And again, as I said, the exam specification is laid out in the same order as well. So unless you're super aware of your strengths and weaknesses, you are a final year student, you're a recent graduate, and you can sort of exactly pinpoint, what areas you need to fix, then non-sequential approach might work. And it does work for a lot of my students who fall in that category. But for the vast majority of the students, my recommendation is take a linear, time-tested sequential approach and get the job done.